here today with Pete Henkes, one of the most influential people in Wisconsin cross-country and distance running in the last half century. His career began as a high school and collegiate runner in Wisconsin. Pete moved on after graduation to become a cross-country and track coach. He is most especially recognized as a race director of all events at the nationally renowned course at UW Parkside. Pete is founder of one of the most successful road races in the state. He directs, coaches, and finances his highly successful Wisconsin Runner racing team. Pete has been the meet director of the high school Midwest, initially Kinney, then Footlocker, and now Eastbay cross-country meet, as well as one of the managers, directors of the national meet. Pete, I'd like to first ask you about your early years of competing in high school and college.
Well, I decided to run my sophomore year in high school. My passion was to play basketball. And Bill Greiton, who ended his career at Racine Case, was the Racine St. Catherine's high school coach the year before. He left behind a real good team. And the new coach, his name was Chuck Wood, who was just hired, was also the sophomore basketball coach. So the reason I went out for cross country was to get in good with the sophomore basketball coach. Now, Chuck didn't really know anything about cross country, but he was sixth man on the Loyola basketball team that was all black players. And he dressed like Al McGuire. He didn't know cross country, but he knew how to win, and he knew how to make you feel good. So I went out for cross country, and thank God I fell in love with the sport, because I never would have made the basketball team, but ran on a really good team. I know my first meet was a dual meet. We ran Milwaukee Marshall, who was a public school state champion that year. We slammed them, and coach didn't think we ran hills hard enough, so we did like 300s up a hill after that. And so I thought, oh boy, this is cross country. And I ran on 2 state championship teams at St. Catherine's. We trained extremely hard. Before my senior year, I had 2 100-mile weeks in the summer. One of them ended with the Pavo Nurmi Marathon, which was my one and only marathon in my life. I was on like 2:40 pace through 22 miles, and then I ended up running 3:08. So, but that, I was on 2 real good teams. Bill Greiton had instilled a lot of the traditions there. For example, no underclassmen would ever have to need a ride. Seniors would pick you up for double sessions before school started. That there was no hazing. This is the legacy of the program, and everybody's accepted, and I learned a lot from that. Then I went on to Carthage College, where for me my goal was always to just qualify for nationals. If I never made a final, but I did run on a real good cross-country team. We were the last team, as a matter of fact, in 1973 to beat North Central College for the CCIW championship. So it's been like 50 years since anybody else has beaten them. Went on after that to teach elementary school at Racine St. Edwards. We had 1 track meet a year there, a parochial city meet. And I said, shoot, we need more than that. So I started a track team. We got a couple dual meets with local area middle schools, and we had 70 kids in each grade. We had 2 rooms of 35. So 5th through 8th grade, I had 200 kids on my track team. I remember over Easter vacation, I went and laid out a track on the parking lot. And one of my buddies I ran with in high school worked for the city, and he painted the line. So without permission, I put a 3-lane track on the playground, which is still there to this day. They still add the track every year when they resurface the lot. And I had, at that time, I had the high school teams. Their seniors would come after practice and help me once in a while. And we practiced 3 times a week, but I think this is what we need more of, this grassroots fun training. So that was my first coaching experience, and at the same time I was road racing, and that's when myself and Tom Anzac, former lacrosse runner and now the Platteville coach, we started the Wisconsin Grand Prix, which is a run for pay series for the state, and we were ahead of our time. USATF, which at that time was called Athletics Congress, they threatened to drum us out for life because of the system, because we were acting too much like Steve Prefontaine, and we were too big for our britches. So that made us feel real good. But it was a successful series, and it brought a lot of the good road runners to the same races. And again, we fell apart for maybe lack of interest, for as directors, or for neither one of us like getting sponsors, but went for 3 years and it was successful. And that's about when I got into high school coaching, which was again a kind of a weird situation. Kenosha St. Joseph's hadn't had a team for quite a while, and 2 of the kids on their track team I had ran with their older brothers at Carthage, and they said, "Will you coach us? Our parents will pay. It's an experiment." I said, "Okay." And then, I needed an assistant. So I got Kim Merritt, who was at the time the American record holder in the marathon, one of my good friends and one of my training partners. So we were the Kenosha St. Joe's coaching staff, and we were kind of like the Bad News Bears. I mean, we didn't have really good uniforms. The athletic director hated us because I was stealing kids from the football team. And it was we were getting better every meet, and we kind of had a cult following. Like they started getting fan buses for the cross country meet. And like one of the kids on the team was a national water skiing champion. All the girls loved them. So we had a really wild following. And I think the big thing for state, they canceled the football bus and added an extra cross country bus.
Oh, that's pretty that's pretty remarkable.
We ended up that year finishing second in the, can't remember if it was Metro or Catholic Conference back then, to Pianono, and then we went on to lose a state meet by 3 points. So I was pretty proud of having a team that these kids had never run cross before to finish second in the WISA state meet, which was it was fun and interesting, and Kim was a great influence on the kids. So I was proud of that, and it kind of gave me a love for coaching. And at the same time, I started the Wisconsin Runner newspaper with my brother John, and it was a monthly periodical on running in the state, and it was fairly successful. But then my brother went on to be Tommy Thompson, the governor's press secretary, so he left, and I just couldn't keep doing it on my own, and I didn't like collecting bills for ads and stuff. But I think we started something, and that's where the Wisconsin Runner Company started, and eventually the racing team and the timing that we do. So and then I coached at Racine Horlick for 3 years, and made it to state 2 of the 3. Girls team, the only time they ever made it to state was during that time. And that's when I started dabbling in putting on meets. I remember we went to a meet up at Brookfield, which was a pretty big meet, and there was a craft fair that day. And the craft fair people were getting in the way of the meet, and people said, some of the other coaches said, "Hey, you put on a meet at Parkside, we'll come." So that's when we started the Rebel Invite, which traditionally has over 1,000 participants every year, and started goofing around with different timing systems. The program we used initially, my little brother, backtracking, going over a board a little, was running at St. Catherine's at the same time. And they won state that year. One of his teammates, named Frank Beccaro, wrote a program that we used. And we actually used that same program to time the Big Ten meet. So we had some cutting edge stuff early on. This was all the manual scoring with the pull tags, and we were doing a good job with it. And I guess people recognized it, because out of the blue one day I got a call from a guy from down south with a southern drawl, and he said, "This is Max Mayo, the director of Kenny Cross Country. We'd like you to run the Midwest meet." I said, "Well, Joe Newton's the meet director." Now, Joe is probably the most renowned cross country coach in the history of the country. And, I said, "Well, Joe Newton's, we fired him." And, okay.
Whoa, no pressure on that one, huh?
And so, okay. And so that's how I got into, I was a young coach, a young race director doing the Kenny meet. And was kind of interesting too, because they came up to look at courses, and the first year we ran it at Johnson's Park in Racine because they were paranoid on being on a college campus. So we're on this golf course. Bill Greitman had laid out the course for me. And then the day of the meet, it was 80 degrees out and sunny, perfect weather. So golfers were so PO'd they could golf that day because we had this cross-country meet. Well, the next year, the river flooded the week before, and it was under ice, of course, so we moved the meet to Parkside. So we virtually called every entrant, and then we moved the time schedule back a half hour per race. And we posted a guy at the gate of the park in Racine to say, hey, here's where you go. And so it was at Parkside ever since, but that's how it moved. And that's by the same token, Kenny was really careful about not breaking any high school rules. Like, I had set a meeting up with Jim Doherty, who was the Nike rep at the time. He's a good runner from Indiana. And we went to Chicago, and he pushed, Nike sponsoring the equipment for the Kenny meet. And they said, thanks, but no thanks. We're kind of paranoid, and we're going to keep buying stuff for now. But I got all the cool new Nike stuff for Horlick. They donated it to me for setting up the meeting. So our kids were wearing full zip-down sweats before they were on the market. So I was kind of hero with the kids on that stuff. And
well, on the other hand, too, that had to be well earned for taking on meet management of something that huge.
But I mean, the Kenny meet, we evolved with over the years with timing. I think the Parkside crew, especially with all the NAI meets down there with Wayne Donnell, the old athletic director who had the vision of building a cross-country course. I mean, we manually time meets better than anybody in the whole world. But times change. We went to the championship and now to the bib chips, and like I own my own system. But that's one thing I've always been concerned about, was doing it right. Whenever I put on an event, I always look at the consequences and the unintended consequences when I make a decision, because number one, the athlete is most important, doing stuff for the athlete. And the people timing the meet and officiating and supporting you set up stuff so it's easy for them and optimal conditions, and parents and spectators are important too. So I don't just put up a fence. I think, okay, if I put a fence here, what's going to happen? Like anything I do, I try to think it out so that it's optimum for everybody. Like with this COVID stuff, it was hard to do stuff, but we had alleys, 4 alleys through 400 meters at the starting line. We had a separate coaching athlete area, which we expanded and doubled the portal it's in. And we introduced, teams couldn't even go on the starting line until the start, and we introduced them. So we made the best of a bad situation, and I think we did it as good or better than anybody in the whole country. And again, it's you adapt to the situation. I was think, no sense crying about something. You just do the best you can. I mean, I go to meets, and we time not just down there anywhere, and people are crying when it's raining and stuff like, man, this is cross country. When coaches are negative, like, oh, it's terrible out. I hate that downer attitude. Like, I always, and my crew always tries to be extremely positive, whatever we do.
Well, you've had such a great crew, and they continuously, the years of experience of them probably managing meets has to rank well in the hundreds of years that cumulatively you've got.
What we've done, and I've learned again from Bill Greitman, you always try and have a wide range of ages on your staff. Like, there's some kids now, John and Leanne Pomeroy. John ran for me in high school, and his wife was a swimmer at Horlick. Their kids used to load stuff out in the back of the truck. Their kids in their high school, they can set up a finish link system and zone in the cameras. They can set up the MyLaps finish line. So these kids can actually do it now. And some of the older guys, as you get older, you can't do as much, but your expertise and your knowledge helps. So the old guys teach the kids, I think, work ethic and patience, and the young guys teach the old guys how to use their phones. So, having a cross section of ages, and that is extremely important. So everybody doesn't quit at the same time. So, and I've been fortunate with the turnover that we've had, that people are energetic, enthusiastic, and you lose one or two along the way. You hate to see it, but we're still functioning.
Do you want to continue talking about the Footlocker? The Kinney meet was specifically Kinney for a block of years, then it became Footlocker as a sponsor, and some of the things about that.
Well, Kenny owned Footlocker, okay, and at that time they felt it was a branding thing. It was better to go Footlocker. And by the same token, Footlocker owns Eastbay. And Footlocker a couple of years ago restructured, and Footlocker was more their retail front, more the hip hop, casual clothes type of thing, where Eastbay has been the team sport aspect of it. And so it's different but the same. My boss at Footlocker is still in charge of the meet per se, so it's not as big a transition as people would think. It was tough. We canceled the meet 2 years ago, and last year pulling it off was kind of hard. It took a while to get everything in place, and it was the only series in the country. They had qualifiers in a national meet, and it was hard. Like, we had traditionally given kids backpacks, which we couldn't get, but I was fortunate to get Molly Seidel to be able to come to our meet, she was just fantastic with. And I mean, she has a history. She has like virtually all the high school records on the Parkside course.
She was probably the highest profile American distance runner, coming off of her bronze medal.
And again, she hadn't made a Wisconsin appearance since the Olympics, so having her there was great, and she interacted with everybody. I thought it was kind of cool. For one of the races, she held the finish line. She held the finish line with Caden Merritt, whose grandma was Kim Merritt. So, and he's an 8th grader, in good little runner. So, him and Molly had a blast together, and so it was a great event. And we had some trouble pulling the meet off, though. I mean, 4 days before the meet, Footlocker higher ups wanted to cancel the meet because of the incidents that had happened in Waukesha, the parade incident. And thank goodness the head of global security from Footlocker, who had been all over the world, green lighted it. But I had to have, like, some of my timing crew are cops. They had to wear police vests, and they had to be armed, and I had to have an extra cop on an ATV with an AR-15 in the woods to satisfy the security needs of the event, which I was 100% certain we were fine. And we had, for example, a group from Nebraska who was bringing a bus. Their bus company went driving to Wisconsin because they didn't think it was safe between the summer riots and the Waukesha incident. So I got them a different bus company. But I mean, the stuff that happened in Kenosha, a lot of people didn't know where Kenosha was, but boy, they did now, unfortunately for the wrong things. But I mean, it was a trying 2 years, quite honestly, but I think...
Now, do you want to get back into talking about the Footlocker? I mean, that's such a long span. Is that 40
some years.
40 plus years, yeah.
Yeah, and it started with the few people at Kenny wanted to do something as part of, I believe, the President's Physical Fitness Program.
What year was the first one then?
I believe it was like 79. I wasn't involved until like about the 6th year.
Okay.
And what it did, it put cross-country runners in the limelight. Our sport hadn't received that kind of national attention. And what it did for a lot of kids, you get kids from, like, say, North Dakota or some little burg in North Carolina who never had chances to run good track meets and get good times. If they could compete well in the Kenny, Footlocker, Eastbay, that would open up them to college coaches. And it became, now there's obviously the Nike series now, which is a great series too, but it got the best of the best together post high school season. And I mean, you look at the performances that have been phenomenal. It affects, quite frankly, it affects scholarships. I know a lot of coaching friends, they say, gee, I'm recruiting so-and-so. I hope they don't run too good at Footlocker because now other people will be after them. And it's, I mean, quite frankly, our Midwest regional, I think, is the toughest region in the country. I'm not saying the top end of the other ones aren't better, but if you look at depth of field, I mean, the states in our region are phenomenal. And I mean, there's been some great performances, and you look at the Olympians, and I mean, just look at who's on the top of the game now, like Cole Hocker won it 2 years ago, and when he went to Oregon, and Molly Seidel, you know, and now she's an Olympic medalist, and like Grant Fisher is running great for the Bowerman Club, and you know, it's been a stepping stone. And if you look at the all-time list at Footlocker, especially on the guys' side, it's a who's who of American distance running, and most of those athletes say that was their first step to stardom, and it was kind of funny.
You want to talk too, maybe about some of the, what do I want to say, the Midwest alumni? I mean, the Dathan Ritzenheims, Chris Solinsky's, Susie Favors. I mean,
Chris Derrick, George and Eduardo Torres, Don Sage, and
did Adam Goucher ran here too?
Adam
Right?
Goucher, Grant Fisher. On the women's side, it's a little leaner, and that's traditionally the way it is. A lot of, and some of them who were back in the pack ended up being top collegiates, but on the guy side especially, and our top women like Carrie Tollefson, who is probably the voice of distance running now from the announcing standpoint in the U.S. She was a multiple champ here, and a lot of the top collegiates right now, you know, all ran the Footlocker Midwest Regional. And it's, you look at their college bio pages, what they put under high school achievements, the Footlocker meet is always listed as a high school achievement, especially if you ran nationals. So it's been fun. It's really, it put our sport a little more into the limelight. You know, so many of the other sports, like you take football, soccer, volleyball, they've got this shock and awe type of environment. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's nice to make stuff Hollywood. I mean, or else you lose people. You have to keep up with the times. And hey, we are special, we are good, and we're gonna kick butt and make it that way.
Yeah, it is. It is always the energy and excitement at that starting line when there are all these state champions, all these all-state runners on there. Now, the course has also hosted a number of other national meets.
We've had the NAIA meet had been there for a lot of years, and then the NCAA 2 Division Nationals has been there, but every year almost we've had a major conference championship there, and I've directed it for them. So we've had the CCIW for Carthage, the Great Lakes for Parkside, the UAA for University of Chicago, the Horizon League for UWM and Green Bay, the Big East for Marquette. We've had them multiple times. And actually, in 2019, the Big East was supposed to be somewhere else, and I don't know what happened, so they called me up and said, will you run the meet for us? And 2019 was a real wet year. We actually, the Big East Championships was Halloween weekend. It was October 31st, and it snowed 8 inches the day before the meet. and the ground wasn't frozen. Usually if we have snow on the course, the ground is frozen. So, I mean, we put this meet on, and had to broadcast it live on the Big East website, so we had to get a truck in with an antenna, and it was kind of interesting because lady doing the color commentary interviews after was an 800-meter runner. The kid who won it was from Butler, and he's an Englishman, and she said, "Oh, how could you run in these terrible conditions, snow?" And he said, "Oh, this is my 5 years in this country, mate. This is the first time we've really had real cross-country weather. This is what it's all about." And again, that was cool. Like the Big East one year, again, they come a few times when we had water. There's a creek that runs through the course with the culvert that runs into the Pike River. It's usually maybe a foot deep, maybe 2 if it's high. It was 4 feet deep. There were salmon coming up the river to spawn. There were virtually hundreds of salmon jumping in this creek during the race. So you come down the hill, you'd see salmon as you go over the bridge jumping underneath you. And it was muddy that year, but I mean, cross country, I think we've trended to being too pristine, on too manicured type of course. Now my philosophy is you want a course safe. The ground should be firm underneath. So that means you get rid of all the black walnuts, the leaves. But you're going to run through a puddle or two, and that's part of the sport. And unfortunately, as Americans, we're too hung up on times, I think. I mean, times are great from a historical perspective, but cross country is about winning. And as a country, I don't think we look at it that way compared to the rest of the world. I mean, it matters, but people are so concerned about their PR on a certain course or annually. And I mean, even the same course from September to October to November, from one year to the next, it could be decidedly different. You could have a muddy, wet, rainy fall or an extremely arid, dry fall. I mean, there's all kinds of factors, and it isn't like running on a track. And I think we're getting more back to the competitive side of stuff. I think people with limited travel because of COVID, now you're going more dual meets and stuff in the team aspect and winning, which I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I think we're trending back to that a little bit more.
And now that also hosted was the USA Cross Country Championships, and when Bob Kennedy won a meet there.
Yeah, that was
around 2000 or something.
That was, I believe, it was '98. I think that was the greatest day of cross country in U.S. history because we had the Kenny meet and the U.S. National Championships together the same day. And it was a great day of cross country, and it came down to a kick between Bob Kennedy and Todd Williams for the U.S. Championship, both whom had won Footlocker or Kenny on the course a few years earlier. So that was really cool. And it was just an electric atmosphere. I mean, like I said, it was a great day of cross country, and they did it about 5 years later at New York at Van Cortlandt Park. They had the national championships in conjunction with Footlocker, and that was great. And it let a lot of other people see our pros because, people don't really get the exposure to our post-collegiate elites. And having it piggybacked with the high school elite event was really a great day.
Oh, that's so cool. You started the Wisconsin Runner Racing Team as a group to help provide races and support for largely post-collegiate runners. And I know your teams have had a lot of success individually. You've had a lot of success. You want to talk a little bit about those?
The Wisconsin Runner Racing Team basically is a high school postseason team. I was coaching at Racine Horlick, and my little brother Chris was running at St. Catherine's, and they were state champions as a team. So we actually won Junior Olympic Nationals that year because John Posehn from St. Catherine's was a private school state champ. Lee Zubrod from Burlington was a public school state champ. So they were Wisconsin runner teammates. And and it started as that, then it evolved into a post-collegiate club. And I've never recruited anybody. We've taken whoever's come, and our goal has always been to get people to the meets that they should be in. So in other words, if you're a 155, 800 meter runner, we'll get you meets around the Midwest. If you're 149, we'll get you to Stanford, or we'll get you to the East Coast. And been very fortunate. We've had fairly good sponsorship along the way. We had Adidas to start, then Nike, and now New Balance. And New Balance, part of the reason we have it is the head of their elite athletes is Andy Downen, who ran for us. And we've been fortunate. We've had great coaches donating their time to coach, most notably Peter Tagan and Jerry Schumacher from Wisconsin. Before Jerry went out to the Bowerman Track Club, he was our primary club coach. And then we've had other people like Mike DeWitt from Parkside. And currently we have Thomas Breitbach, who is in Madison. He's a women's assistant distance coach at Madison, and he works at Moving Shoes, who's coaching our elite athletes. And these people have never taken a salary. We've been fortunate with sponsorship, and it's my hobby. I annually put anywhere from $8,000 to $20,000 out of my pocket into the club. Big thing everybody thinks gear is it, but it's a travel. To fly to the meets you have to get to. But again, it's my hobby, and it's my way to give back to the sport that's been good to me. And we've had I think like close to 30 Olympic trials finalists, one gold medalist, Gwen Jorgensen. She did a running, even though her triathlon club where she got her medal was different, but she ran for Wisconsin runner. She just missed a world team in cross country even. And we've had numerous world cross-country qualifiers over the years, and we've had several club national championships. We've won the club national championships. We've won the USA distance medley nationals, and like recently, Josh Slamka, the Racine Horlick coach, was the leader in the Masters world in the 800 and the 1500 at 42 years old. He was running 152 in the 800, which is, Josh decided to come back to running after a hiatus of about 6 or 7 years and wanted to break 2 in the 800. He went a little past that.
Whoa, that is, that's got to rank up there among world class with Masters, huh?
Yeah, well, he was a world leader for 2 years in a row in the 800, and it was kind of the thing with COVID, which was kind of a bummer. We were going to try and set up an 800. Jerry Schumacher was doing it out in Portland. We were going to set up a U.S. record attempt, and then COVID just squashed everything that spring. And so, but, things changed, and you always got to be optimistic. Things are going to get better.
All your contributions and achievements have been recognized. You're a member of 4 Hall of Fames. You want to share with us?
Well, Hall of Fames, it's always nice to be recognized by your peers. I'm not a big awards type of guy. If you look around my house, there's artwork and stuff. There's not a lot of stuff up, but I'm a member of the Wisconsin Cross Country Coaches Association and Track Coaches Hall of Fame, and the Footlocker Cross Country Hall of Fame, and the Racine Sports Fund. So again, it's nice to be recognized by your peers, and I truly appreciate that, but that's not the reason you do stuff. It's almost like you start worried when they start naming stuff after you, putting your Hall of Fames, or they tried to bury you, So it's like, I want to keep going at this until I can't anymore. It's my life. I enjoy it. I've always, thought that the running community, especially the distance community, the friends you make over the years are phenomenal. I know if anything ever happened to me, my wife could call a bazillion people up and they'd be here in a heartbeat to help. Some of our Wisconsin Runner Racing Team members are people that, got to know through the club, and I've always been proud of the fact that, they're mostly from Wisconsin schools unless they moved up here for postgraduate, but we've had D1, D2, D3 athletes all as teammates. And there's no, I'm D1 or you're D3. That's never happened. I mean, we've had such a good chemistry. And what it's done, I think, the club, it's allowed people to compete and to be in a team environment. And quite frankly, a lot of times, even though they were on teams, they weren't on a good team. And being part of something when you're going, like this year, Shamrock Shuffle's coming up in 3 weeks in Chicago. It's the biggest 8K in the world. And they have team scoring. And I mean, our goals are to go down there and win these. And we've got, I'm not saying we're gonna, but we've got a very good shot of, winning that title. And that being part of the team environment, that's really important. And it makes me feel good that I can, be a catalyst in this happening.
Well, and from my observation too, I've seen runners that have been maybe good college runners, but they've really blossomed, post-collegiately, and they never would have been getting a Nike contract or anything on there, and Wisconsin Runner has certainly provided that for them.
Yeah, and I've always told people, hey, if you're running good and something better comes up, take it. No hard feelings. I did get, and it's hard, to keep committed to do this, because I know there's more than once after a national championship, especially with the ladies more than the guys, they're sitting there crying after the race, having a bad race, and why do I do this? Maybe I should quit. And I say, hey, just chill for a day or two and reevaluate. But the way I've looked at it, you can never buy those years back unless you're like a Josh Slapka, But, if you can do it, and you're used to being poor from college, so, if you're going to hang around and do this, and sometimes the friends you make and the business opportunities that arise 5 years down the road, if you've stuck with running, you're not going to probably be any worse off financially, and you're going to seen more places, made good friends, and probably had business opportunities you wouldn't have if you had kept running. Plus, you want to know, how good can I be? Yeah, I think most people quit because of families, careers, or a lot of times injuries just drive people out of the game. That it's just too hard, whether it be plantar fascia, recurring something. It gets to a certain point, especially when you've got a high level that you expect from yourself. That's not possible. So then it's time to be a jogger and just do it for health purposes. But it's nice to take it as far as you can if possible.
I also want to speak about your contributions to the Wisconsin Track Coaches Association and Wisconsin Cross Country Coaches Association clinics over the past 40 plus years. You've been a big supporter of the clinics, and I know as a Wisconsin coach to have been a beneficiary of some great clinics, but you've appreciation you've really helped provide in that aspect, and I wanted to mention that.
Yeah, well, we've been a sponsor and actively involved in Wisconsin Track Coaches every year, cross country almost every year, and I feel it's important to give back to the sport, and clinics are important, and I have a hard time when people don't go to them. Personally, I think even if you're an experienced older coach, just sitting around and talking to people over a beer or a coffee is as critical as the speakers, just bringing people together and chatting. I think it's critical, and I think it's important to keep these things rolling, and I do what I can sponsorship-wise, speaking if I every now and then add them, and I'm proud to be part of it.
Well, again, on behalf of coaches and runners everywhere, it's with admiration and appreciation. I want to thank you for all you've done for our sport. Thanks for taking the time to tell your story, and hopefully there's many more years left of your endeavors. Thanks, Pete.
You're welcome.